Like any normal teenager, Alex loved to go out with friends. Sometimes he would ask for permission, but most times he did not. One day, as he was coming back home from a night of partying, his mother was patiently waiting for him in the living room. He very slowly opened the door and tried to make the least noise as possible, but all his efforts failed when he saw his mom waiting. She was furious. She just about had it with him being so irresponsible, especially since he had school the following day. They had a big argument, and Alex told his mother that was the last time he would be up so late on a weekday. His mother told him that it was not only the last time a weekday, but on weekends as well. She tried explaining how worried for him she'd get, especially since he would drive her car. She was afraid he would crash somewhere or get hit by a drunk driver. Alex was upset and left the house by slamming the door behind him. He went to the car to cool down, and after an hour or so he decided to go back inside the house. He had seen his mom look out towards the car and shut the lights off about 30 minutes before. He walked towards the front door, and as he jingled his keys out from his pocket, he heard some leaves crunch behind him. He turned to find nothing behind him. He leaned down to open the door, and was having difficulty doing so. It was taking him longer to find the keyhole, and thought for a second that the locks had been changed, since there could not be another explanation. He turned towards the dim street light, since that was his only source of light, and checked the key to make sure it was the correct one. He froze in place when he realized there was a person standing on the sidewalk at the end of his walkway. The person was wearing a baggy dark-colored hoodie with their hands in the front pocket. Alex couldn't see this person's face at all. He turned to try and open the door again. He looked down the walkway, and the person was gone. He suddenly felt a warmth behind his neck. It felt like a warm gust of wind blowing through his neck hairs. He jumped up and turned around with his arms in a protective position, only to come face to face with nothing. Alex turned to try the door yet again, only to find the door to his house was wide open. He ran inside, locked the door frantically, and went to find his mom. They did a search through the house, and found no one in or around their home. To this date, Alex still wonders who that was haunting him that night. I moved to a new apartment at a complex I had lived before many years ago. Strangely enough, I managed to end up in same exact unit number as the one I had just moved out of. I always felt watched in my new apartment, but I did not feel scared or bothered by it. It was very strange to have these feelings, because I had never felt them before. There were days that I was all by myself, but never felt lonely. It was as if there was always someone keeping me company. After some time, I started smelling a familiar men's perfume, but could not find the source. I thought it must have been a magazine or even someone that had walked by and left the aroma, but by the time I'd look out my window, there was no one. One day out of the blue, my neighbor who was friends with the complex manager started to tell me a story about the man who lived in my apartment prior to me moving in. She told me that a few months before I moved in, the police had gone to talk to the manager to inform her that the tenant had been killed. He was a businessman, and the day he'd been murdered, he had received a phone call. He left his groceries abruptly on the kitchen counter and left in a hurry. He drove to a shopping center that was nearby, and that's where he had been gunned down. The police went to the apartment to look for clues, but never found who had killed him. I asked my neighbor if she knew the man's name. When she said the name, I was shocked. I had known that man when I had previously lived at the complex years ago. I just never knew his exact unit. I remembered he used the cologne I had many times smelled near me in my apartment. He was always very nice and friendly and told me to call him Uncle. I had no doubt his spirit was still in my apartment. The feelings of being watched and the cologne slowly dissipated throughout the next months until they stopped. After I moved out from that unit, I never felt his presence or smelled his cologne again. I had been working at the hospital for about a week when my supervisor sent me to the mailroom in the lower level to check for our department's mail. She had given me a tour of the hospital on my first day employed, and so I felt confident enough I could find it with no problem. The elevator was taking a long time to come to my floor, and I could see it was still up high on a top level. I decided to take the stairs instead. I only had to go 3 floors down, they couldn't be that bad. I finally found the stairs, and as I got to the lower level, I had no idea which way to go. I was expecting signs with directions, or arrows, but there were no signs indicating where I was. The hallway was quiet, and the lighting was opaque. I wandered around looking for anyone, but no one was in sight to direct me. I started walking down a hallway that had similar paint as the main hallway on the main floor. I assumed that must have been the hallway where the elevator was. I walked towards it. I saw there were doors with no signs, and I tried to open them to see if I could find someone to direct me, but all of the doors were locked. I finally got to the familiar hallway. As I turned into it, I could see that someone had turned onto another hallway. I called out to them and hurried up to try and catch up. I came to find an empty hallway again. I hurried down the hallway, and then I could hear the person's footsteps, but couldn't see them. I turned where the person must have turned because there was no other option. I came up to yet another hallway and again could see the person had made another turn. I could not tell if it was a man or a woman, but by then my heart was racing, feeling the anxiety of being lost. As I made the next turn, to my surprise, I came to a dead end, only there was a big stainless steel, thick door with a sign on top that read morgue. I immediately felt dizzy when I realized there was no way the person ahead of me had entered that door. There's no way I didn't hear that gigantic heavy door open or close.